Most people live their entire lives asleep, chained by routine, comfort, and the values handed down to them. Friedrich Nietzsche saw this with brutal clarity. He warned us that breaking free from the herd, from the illusions of society and tradition, is the hardest path a human being can walk. His message was not gentle but urgent. Only a few will ever dare to wake up, to face reality without illusions, and to become who they truly are. The comfort of the herd is one of Nietzsche's sharpest insights into human psychology and society. At the heart of his philosophy lies the idea that most people would rather belong than stand alone, even if belonging means sacrificing their individuality and authenticity. To Nietzsche, the herd was not just a metaphor for society, but a reality, a collection of people who think the same, act the same, and judge by the same standards, because that sameness provides safety. Conformity is not an accident, but a choice born of fear. The herd protects people from the anxiety of freedom, to make your own values, to decide for yourself what is good and evil, to live without guarantees. These are terrifying responsibilities. So instead, most settle for what is familiar. They adopt the moral codes given to them, follow traditions without questioning, and blend into the crowd. The herd whispers that comfort is better than courage, and most listen. Nietzsche saw this dynamic everywhere, in religion, in politics, in culture. Herd morality, as he called it, values humility, obedience, equality, and safety. These are virtues designed to protect the weak, to keep society stable, and to prevent the rise of those who might threaten the status quo. But in Nietzsche's eyes, these so-called virtues are also chains. They keep people small. They stop individuals from striving, from risking, from reaching higher. By glorifying meekness, herd morality suppresses strength, ambition, and creativity. It is not that humility or obedience are always wrong, but that they become dangerous when they are imposed as absolutes. When society tells you that standing out is prideful, that questioning is rebellion, that striving for greatness is arrogance, it is really saying, stay in line. Do not disturb the herd. What makes the comfort of the herd so seductive is that it feels safe. When you belong to the herd, you do not need to face existential dread alone. Your values are given to you. Your purpose is defined for you. You do not need to wrestle with the question of meaning, because the herd already has answers. Whether through religion, culture, or ideology, it provides a framework where everything is explained and justified. Nietzsche understood how tempting this security is. Most people are not ready to stare into the abyss of uncertainty, to face life without prepackaged meaning. So they prefer to walk with the herd, even if it means never discovering who they really are. Yet Nietzsche's warning is that the herd comes at a price. When you submit to the herd, you surrender your uniqueness. You trade authenticity for approval. You live according to borrowed values, not your own. The herd might protect you from danger, but it also prevents you from growth. It rewards sameness and punishes difference. And in doing so, it keeps most people from waking up to their true potential. To wake up would mean realizing that the comfort you feel is a trap. It would mean questioning what you have been taught, even if it makes you an outcast. It would mean daring to live without the safety of the herd, even if it leaves you exposed. Nietzsche did not deny the difficulty of this path. He knew how heavy the burden of freedom can be. But he also believed that greatness, creativity, and true individuality can only emerge once a person steps away from the herd. This is why he warned that most people will never wake up, because comfort is too sweet and courage is too rare. Fear of freedom is one of the deepest barriers that Nietzsche identified in the human condition. At first, it sounds paradoxical. Freedom is something most people claim to want. Societies praise liberty, individuals dream of independence, and cultures celebrate the idea of living by one's own rules. Yet Nietzsche saw through this surface illusion. What people actually desire more often than not is the appearance of freedom without its burden. Real freedom is not simply the ability to choose, it is the responsibility of creating your own path, your own values, your own meaning. And it is precisely this responsibility that terrifies the majority. To stand alone without the comfort of tradition or authority, to admit that no higher power guarantees the correctness of your choices, is to step into a space of radical uncertainty. Nietzsche argued that most people are not prepared for this kind of courage. Instead, they retreat into systems that make choices for them, while convincing themselves they are free. This fear of freedom reveals itself in how strongly people cling to religion, morality, and ideology. These systems provide ready-made answers about what is good and evil, right and wrong, meaningful and meaningless. To abandon them would mean entering a world where nothing is fixed, where every value must be built from scratch. Such a world is exhilarating for a strong spirit, but unbearable for a weak one. Nietzsche recognized that people dread the silence of the universe when there is no authority to speak on their behalf. They would rather obey rules, even harsh ones, than accept the terrifying possibility that there are no rules except those they create. This is why Nietzsche described freedom not as a gift, but as a task, a challenge only the few are willing to endure. The fear of freedom also explains why people so often embrace conformity. On the surface, it seems easy to live however you want, but in practice, this creates conflict with society. When someone refuses to follow conventions, they risk ridicule, isolation, and rejection. They may be called arrogant, selfish, or immoral. For many, this social pressure is unbearable. It is easier to suppress one's true desires than to pay the price of standing apart. Nietzsche understood that this suppression is not harmless. It breeds resentment, a deep bitterness toward those who do have the courage to live authentically. This resentment fuels the moral judgments of the herd, which condemns strength and independence as dangerous or wrong. In this way, fear of freedom is not just an inner struggle, but a social mechanism that keeps people in line. What makes this fear so powerful is that freedom forces a confrontation with the void. Once you strip away tradition and authority, you are left with the raw fact of existence. Life has no inherent purpose. To the majority, this feels unbearable, even nihilistic. Nietzsche did not deny the terror of this realization, but he believed it was the necessary starting point for creating authentic meaning. Instead of running from the void, one must embrace it and use it as a canvas for self-creation. But to do this requires immense strength, because it means living without excuses. You cannot blame society, God, or fate for your choices. You cannot lean on borrowed beliefs to shield you from doubt. You must face life with the knowledge that the responsibility for your existence rests entirely on your shoulders. Nietzsche warned that because of this, most people will never fully embrace freedom. They will continue to talk about liberty, but in practice they will seek authority, tradition, and belonging to protect them from the weight of choice. They will confuse comfort with freedom, obedience with safety, and submission with meaning. True freedom, the kind Nietzsche envisioned, demands more than slogans or rights. It demands the courage to live without guarantees. It is not given but earned, and it requires a soul strong enough to face the vast uncertainty of existence without turning away. Slave morality and master morality are central to Nietzsche's understanding of how human beings create and adopt values. He believed that morality is not universal, eternal, or divinely given, but instead the product of human power dynamics and psychological needs. In this sense, morality is a human invention, and Nietzsche identified two primary types: the morality of the strong, which he called master morality, and the morality of the weak, which he called slave morality. These two moral frameworks clash, and the dominance of one over the other determines the shape of culture and society. Nietzsche's warning is that most people live under the grip of slave morality, which disguises weakness as virtue and keeps humanity from rising to its fullest potential. Master morality emerges from the powerful, from individuals or groups who feel strong, confident, and overflowing with vitality. For them, morality is an expression of strength. They define good in terms of qualities that affirm life: courage, ambition, creativity, self-discipline, and the ability to shape one's own destiny. Evil in their eyes is weakness, cowardice, dishonesty, and anything that drags life downward. Master morality celebrates individuality and greatness. It does not concern itself with pity or equality, because from the standpoint of the strong, life is about rising above limits and pushing forward. This kind of morality is rare, demanding, and often misunderstood, because it refuses to accept the herd's need for safety and sameness. Slave morality, on the other hand, originates in the powerless, the oppressed, and the resentful. Those who feel weak and dominated by others invent a morality that flips the values of the strong upside down. Where the masters call strength good, the slaves call it evil. Where the masters value pride, the slaves exalt humility. Where the masters admire independence, the slaves praise obedience. This reversal allows the weak to claim moral superiority over the strong. It is not enough for the powerless to endure their condition. They must reframe it as virtue. Suffering becomes holiness. Weakness becomes goodness. Submission becomes righteousness. Nietzsche argued that Christianity is the clearest example of slave morality. It glorifies meekness, condemns pride, and promises rewards for obedience in another life rather than greatness in this one. The danger of slave morality, in Nietzsche's eyes, is that it gradually spreads until it dominates entire cultures. When society is ruled by slave morality, people no longer admire greatness but fear it. They no longer seek excellence but equality. They no longer strive to rise above but demand that everyone remain the same. In such a world, those who show strength or originality are condemned as selfish or evil, while those who conform are celebrated as good. Slave morality flattens humanity, lowering everyone to the same level under the illusion of virtue. This is why Nietzsche warned that most people will never wake up. They are trapped in a moral framework that tells them mediocrity is noble and that striving for more is dangerous. What makes slave morality so insidious is that it hides its origins. People forget that their values are born from weakness and resentment. They believe their morality is objective and eternal when it is really the product of human psychology and power struggles. Nietzsche's challenge was to expose this illusion and to remind us that values are created, not discovered. He urged individuals to rise above the morality of the herd and to create their own values, affirming life rather than denying it. Yet he also knew that this demand is almost unbearable for most. To embrace master morality requires strength, independence, and the courage to stand against the collective. It means rejecting comfort, pity, and conformity in order to pursue greatness. For Nietzsche, this path is reserved for the few, while the many will remain enclosed in the safety of slave morality, never daring to break free. The illusion of truth is one of Nietzsche's most unsettling insights into human behavior. He argued that people do not seek truth because it is difficult, dangerous, and often uncomfortable. Instead, they seek lies that feel like truth, narratives that soothe their fears and protect their identities. For Nietzsche, most of what we call truth is simply a shared illusion, a set of beliefs that societies agree upon not because they are real, but because they are useful. Human beings cling to these illusions because reality in its raw form is too overwhelming. To see the world as it is, without comforting stories or illusions, demands a strength that very few possess. This is why Nietzsche insisted that most people live under the shadow of falsehood, convinced they know reality while actually hiding from it. One of the clearest examples of this illusion is morality. People believe moral codes are objective, timeless, and absolute, when in reality they are human inventions. Societies create moral systems to maintain order, protect the herd, and give meaning to life. These systems are not truths but agreements, designed to benefit certain groups at certain times. Yet people rarely question them. They accept them as divine or natural laws because doing so relieves them from the burden of thinking independently. Nietzsche pointed out that even science, which claims to pursue truth, often operates with its own illusions. Scientific concepts are human interpretations of the world, not the world itself. Numbers, categories, and laws of nature are ways of imposing order on chaos, but they are not the chaos itself. Truth is always filtered through human perception, which means it is always partial and shaped by human needs. Nietzsche described truth as a mobile army of metaphors, illusions that have been forgotten as illusions. Over time, humans create concepts and words to simplify reality. These words are repeated until they no longer feel like metaphors but like reality itself. For example, calling someone evil is not a description of reality, but a judgment, a label imposed by a moral framework. Yet society uses these labels so often that they become invisible, taken as self-evident truths. This forgetting is what makes the illusion of truth so powerful. People are not consciously lying to themselves. They genuinely believe the stories they have inherited, even though those stories are built on shaky ground. The danger in these illusions is that they prevent growth. If you believe you already possess truth, you have no reason to seek further, to challenge yourself, or to face uncomfortable realities. Nietzsche believed that illusions keep people trapped in mediocrity. They cling to religious dogmas, political ideologies, and cultural myths because these offer certainty. Certainty feels safe, but it is also a cage. It closes the mind to possibility and silences the courage needed to confront the unknown. People would rather live in a lie that feels secure than in a truth that feels terrifying. This is why Nietzsche thought that only a few ever wake up. To wake up means to strip away illusions and see that the world is chaotic, uncertain, and indifferent. It means realizing that truth is not something given, but something created. Nietzsche did not believe this path was easy or even desirable for the majority. To live without illusions requires tremendous strength because it leaves you exposed to the rawness of existence. Most cannot bear this weight, so they turn back to the herd, to the stories that shield them from fear. In this way, the illusion of truth is not an accident, but a necessity for the many. Nietzsche's warning is that those who dare to see through the illusion must be prepared to live differently, to create meaning where none is given, and to accept solitude as the price of honesty. For the rest, the illusion remains a comfort too irresistible to abandon. The death of God is one of Nietzsche's most famous and misunderstood ideas, and at its core it is not a celebration, but a diagnosis. He was not declaring that a divine being had literally died, but observing that in modern society, the belief in God and in the moral and metaphysical framework built upon that belief was collapsing. Science, rationalism, and modernity had eroded the foundations of traditional faith. The old certainties that gave people direction, meaning, and order were no longer credible to the educated mind. Nietzsche saw this shift not as a liberation alone, but as a crisis. When God is dead, the values that depended on him also die. The structures of morality, truth, and purpose built on divine authority lose their grounding. Humanity is left standing in a vast void where meaning is no longer given but must be created. For Nietzsche, this was both a terrifying threat and an extraordinary opportunity. The collapse of these old certainties was terrifying because most people are not prepared to live without them. The belief in God, or in some transcendent order, provides security against the chaos of existence. It answers ultimate questions: why we exist, how we should live, what awaits us after death. Without those answers, people are forced to confront the possibility that life has no inherent meaning, that values are human constructions, and that existence is without guarantees. Nietzsche recognized that this realization can provoke despair. He predicted that many, instead of facing the challenge, would retreat into distractions, ideologies, or even nihilism, the belief that nothing has value or purpose. This is why he described the death of God as a catastrophe for civilization. It removed the foundation of meaning without yet providing a replacement, leaving people vulnerable to confusion and emptiness. Yet Nietzsche did not stop at diagnosing despair. He also saw in this crisis the chance for a higher form of existence. If the old values are gone, humanity has the opportunity to create new ones. Instead of relying on divine authority, individuals could shape their own values and give meaning to their own lives. This was not a call to reckless relativism, but to the courage of self-creation. It meant that meaning is not discovered but forged, not imposed from above, but built from within. Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch embodies this response, the one who dares to face the void, who refuses to escape into illusions, and who creates new values that affirm life. The death of God, therefore, is not simply the end of belief, but the beginning of a new responsibility, the responsibility to live without guarantees and to find strength in the act of becoming. For most people, however, this responsibility is unbearable. Nietzsche warned that when confronted with the void, they would not rise to the challenge but instead seek substitutes. Nationalism, ideology, consumerism, and even blind faith in science could become new gods, filling the emptiness left by the old. These substitutes offer comfort but not authenticity. They keep people from confronting the deeper truth that meaning is not given, but must be created. By turning to distractions, people avoid the anxiety of freedom. They prefer the illusion of certainty to the risk of self-determination. Nietzsche saw this as the path of the herd. Instead of facing the terrifying but liberating task of living without absolutes, most would hide within systems that mimic the role once played by religion. This is why Nietzsche's warning remains so sharp. The death of God is not a past event, but a condition of modern existence. It forces each person to ask whether they will face the void honestly or flee from it into comforting illusions. Nietzsche believed that only a rare few would choose the harder path. To wake up in this context means to acknowledge the collapse of old certainties without despair, to embrace the uncertainty of existence, and to take on the creative task of giving life meaning. Most, however, will never wake up. They will cling to distractions, to new idols, to herd values that promise safety, but deny authenticity. For Nietzsche, this is the tragedy of the death of God. It opens the door to greatness, but only a few will walk through it. The path of the Overman, or Übermensch, is Nietzsche's vision of what humanity could become if it dared to rise above mediocrity and the chains of herd morality. The Overman is not a literal figure but an ideal, a symbol of self-overcoming and the creation of new values. Nietzsche saw that most people live passively, bound by traditions, religions, and social expectations that tell them who they are and how they should live. In contrast, the Overman is someone who refuses to accept ready-made answers. He takes the burden of existence into his own hands and shapes meaning through his own will. This is not simply rebellion against norms, but the act of creating a new way of being, one that affirms life in all its chaos and suffering. For Nietzsche, the rarity of this path was its defining feature. While the herd clings to safety, the Overman dares to embrace freedom fully and to bear the weight of responsibility it demands. To understand the rarity of this path, it is important to recognize what Nietzsche meant by self-overcoming. It is not enough to reject external authority. One must also confront and overcome the limitations within oneself. The Overman is not merely free from society, but free from resentment, weakness, and self-deception. He does not use morality as a disguise for his fears, nor does he resent the strength of others. Instead, he transforms obstacles into fuel for growth. Every difficulty, every pain, every loss becomes a chance to affirm life more deeply. Nietzsche's famous idea of eternal recurrence illustrates this attitude. If you were forced to live the same life over and over again for eternity, could you affirm it joyfully? The Overman is the one who can answer yes, because he has shaped his life so authentically that he would embrace its repetition without regret. For most people, this vision is too overwhelming. The herd prefers certainty, comfort, and conformity. The thought of creating values from nothing feels unbearable. It is far easier to follow traditions or to adopt ideologies that supply meaning without effort. This is why Nietzsche warned that few would ever walk the path of the Overman. To do so requires a rare strength of spirit, the ability to stand alone without external validation, and the courage to accept existence without guarantees. The Overman does not seek salvation in another world or escape from suffering, but says yes to life exactly as it is. This radical affirmation separates him from the many, who see suffering as something to be avoided or explained away, rather than embraced as part of the creative process of becoming. The Overman also represents the possibility of human greatness beyond good and evil. Traditional morality divides the world into rigid categories, but the Overman moves beyond these oppositions. He does not accept inherited definitions of virtue or vice, but creates new values rooted in his own vision of life. This is not selfish indulgence, but the highest form of responsibility, because it means bearing the full weight of existence without excuses. He becomes the author of his own meaning, a creator rather than a follower. In this sense, Nietzsche saw the Overman as the next step in human evolution, not biologically but spiritually. Humanity, he believed, was not an endpoint, but a bridge between the animal and the Overman. Yet Nietzsche also knew that this path was not for everyone. He even insisted that it could only be for the few, because it demanded strength that most people do not possess. The herd will always dominate, guided by fear and comfort. But the Overman shines as an example of what is possible when one refuses to submit to mediocrity. He embodies the courage to wake up when others remain asleep, to create when others conform, to affirm life when others flee from it. Nietzsche's challenge was not to promise that all could become Overmen, but to remind us that greatness requires risk, solitude, and the will to power. The warning is clear. While most will remain trapped in the herd, the rare individual who dares to step beyond it will touch a form of existence far richer and more profound. In the end, Nietzsche's warning is not meant to crush us, but to awaken us. He shows us why most people remain asleep, clinging to the herd, fearing freedom, surrendering to illusions, and hiding from the void left by the death of God. But he also reveals that another path is possible, a harder and lonelier path, where we dare to create our own values and embrace life without guarantees. Most will never take that path. Most will never wake up. But for the few who do, existence itself becomes a work of art, a life lived with courage, strength, and authenticity. The choice, Nietzsche reminds us, is always ours. to remain in the comfort of sleep, or to awaken to the terrifying, liberating task of becoming who we truly are.